I don't owe nothing. He got all his songs already. How you think he got so hot? Came out with all them tapes. I did that. I put them hooks together. I made incredible music. All he did was rhyme 16s. Well, you know, I made the hooks. I made the melodies. Yeah. I made the shit, dog. I'm the man. Up to get my room so I could ram his shit up, ram it up his ass. Right? My window was there. He tried to grab me. So when he came in the window, I punched him in the face.
MaxB and Jim Jones used to be locked in like family, but the second Jim tossed that bond aside, Max stopped being his secret hitmaker and turned into a problem he could never shake off. One move flipped everything, and the man building his sound became the one haunting his every step.
So Jim Jones, compare the names. Look, Max Bigavel, Jim Jones. That don't even add up. That's not on my level, man.
People say it went from love to tension overnight, with Max allegedly taking his girl, messing with his car, and turning parts of Harlem into a battleground just to send a message he wasn't to be played with. This wasn't rap drama, this was real life spilling into the streets. But before any of that, there was just Charlie Wingate, born and raised in Harlem in the middle of the uptown struggle at the Abraham Lincoln housing projects. MaxB's life was marked by pain and survival. His mom was fighting addiction and going in and out of prison, so his grandmother became the one holding him down, trying to keep him steady while the streets kept pulling at him. No matter how hard she tried, trouble stayed close long before he wrote hooks that had the East Coast singing along. Young Charlie first found his voice in the boys' choir of Harlem, using his vocals instead of the streets to be heard. That's where the early pieces of that MaxB sound showed up, the laid-back melodies, the sing-song flow, the wavy cadence people would later recognize. But the music couldn't drown out reality, and by 18, Max was sliding into the wrong lane. In 1997, he caught a robbery case and ended up serving around 8 years in prison. But that time inside didn't—
My name is MaxB, aka Max Bigavel. We know Bigavel stands for Big Jig and Pac, right? But where did the name—
Big Machiavelli, baby.
Yeah.
Big Jig and Machiavelli.
2005, he stepped out with a new name, a sharper focus, and a swagger you only get from living what you talk about. That's when the world met Max Bigavel, a persona he built off the greats, ready to turn his story into something the whole game had to respect. Biggie Smalls, Machiavelli, Tupac, and Jigga, Jay-Z, Max saw himself as the perfect mix of all of them, like he was built from their DNA. The hypnotic flow, the pain that felt like prophecy, and that hustler confidence that made you believe every bar he spit. At that time, the diplomats were running the city. Cameron and Jim Jones had Harlem on lock. Videos everywhere, mixtapes flooding the streets, the pink era in full effect. Max linked back up with Cam, and through that connection, he got introduced to Jim Jones, the certified neighborhood star turned label boss. Before long, Max signed with Jim's Bird Gang label and started working with legendary Harlem producer Dame Grease. And once they got in the studio, it clicked instantly. In 2006, MaxB dropped his first mixtape, $1 Million Baby, and the streets lost it. His voice, his energy, his unpolished but hypnotic style. It felt wild and new, like lightning in a bottle that nobody could recapture.
Boyfriend Charlie Wingate, aka MaxB, a rapper, about the men's money. Then Wingate reaches out to this man, Calvin Leardom.
Every hook sounded like something people would scream out the car windows all summer. Bird Gang wasn't just riding on Max either. They also had another rising star, Stack Bundles, in the camp. With MaxB and Stack both right there, Jim Jones was sitting on a gold mine. Even if he didn't fully realize how big it could get yet, Max quickly turned into the secret weapon, lacing hooks and verses that made Jim's records sound larger than life. Tracks like Baby Girl turning into standouts. Whenever Max's voice came on, the whole song lifted up. But no matter how hot the music got, Max could never fully outrun the street life. In September 2006, everything took a dark turn.
It all began the morning of September 22nd at the Fort Lee Holiday Inn. Police are called there after a man is shot to death. The victim, David Taylor from Florida, was staying in room 227.
Word came back to Max through his ex-girlfriend, Gina Conway, about a man named Alan J. Plowton, a flashy guy running a mortgage and mail fraud play, always riding around in luxury cars with pockets full of cash and top-tier whips. Gina allegedly told Max all about the lifestyle this man was living, and according to her, jealousy and hunger started creeping in. She claimed Max made it clear they could hit a lick, and he'd make sure everybody got taken care of if it went right. It wasn't just small talk anymore, it sounded like a plan. Max wasn't physically there when things went down, but prosecutors painted him as the mastermind pulling strings from the background. Gina Conway, who was also involved in dealing and stripping, testified in court that Max sent her and his stepbrother Kelvin Sims Leardam to rob Plowden at a Holiday Inn in New Jersey. The idea sounded simple on paper. Wait until he left to go clubbing, break in, grab whatever money they could find, and slide out. But the way it played out in real life was messy from the start, and the whole operation ended up looking sloppy in front of the law. Gina and Sims supposedly spent hours driving in circles, missing exits and wasting time while the clock was ticking. By the time they made it to the hotel room, Alan J. Plowden was already back, asleep in bed next to another woman. Then out of nowhere, David Taylor walked in. A surprise, not part of anything they had planned. Sims panicked and shot Taylor in the face execution style, turning what was meant to be a robbery into a homicide case. After that, Gina Conway became the first domino to fall. Once police grabbed her, she told everything to protect herself. She handed over a 169-page statement and pointed straight at Max as the one who set the whole thing in motion. She said he promised her everything: money, loyalty, a future together, if she helped with the setup. When the feds came for Max, they came heavy. He was arrested and hit with life-changing charges, including felony homicide. His bail was set at a massive $2 million, and while MaxB sat in that cold jail cell, it felt like his world froze. But outside that cell, life kept moving, and so did Jim Jones. Jim, the same man who signed Max and had him carrying hooks and melodies on records, was suddenly everywhere.
Got him in his drive already. I don't owe nothing. He got all his songs already. How you think he got so hot? Came out with all them tapes. I did that. I put them hooks together. Yeah. I made incredible music. All he did was rhyme 16s. Well, you know, I made incredible. I made the hooks. I made the melodies. Yeah. I made the shit, dog. I'm the man.
He dropped We Fly High, also known as Ballin', and the track exploded into an anthem, the biggest hit of his career. Max later said he wrote that and claimed he ghost-wrote other big Jim Jones songs while he was stuck inside. While Jim was doing interviews and stacking money, Max was behind bars fighting for his freedom and his name. After 10 months, Max's bail got lowered to $90,000, and that's when Jim stepped in. But it didn't feel friendly. Instead of helping Max out of loyalty, reports say Jim used the bail as leverage. He allegedly agreed to help get Max out only if Max signed over his publishing and agreed to do 6 albums under him. Locked up and desperate to hit the streets again, Max didn't have many choices left. He signed, Jim got control of the publishing behind that wavy sound, and Max got freedom with a future tied up in contracts. MaxB walked out of jail in July 2007, but the price of that freedom stayed on his name. Max walked out a different man, colder, sharper, and carrying more resentment than before. He was broke, felt betrayed, and locked into a contract that handed his future publishing to the same man who seemed to benefit the most from his downfall, at least in his eyes. Jim Jones, the man he once called a brother, kept leveling up while Max sat in a cell watching his influence echo through the streets. Mixtapes and street DVDs kept spinning his name like legend talk, and every time somebody yelled wavy, it stung a little more. If Jim Jones wasn't going to stand beside him, MaxB was done staying quiet. He was ready to treat it like battle. From his point of view, he had every reason to feel crossed. Max felt like it wasn't just politics, it was pockets too. He believed he'd been financially robbed. Reports say Jones controlled Max's publishing, which meant every hook Max laid down, every melodic ad-lib, every catchy line tied to that wavy sound, money flowed back to Jim. And this wasn't just about business, this was about trust. The friendship had gone sour, the loyalty felt broken, and MaxB was moving with a mind focused on revenge and a heart frozen by betrayal. So he stepped away from Bird Gang with a mission. If Jim Jones wasn't going to give him what he felt he was owed, Max was going to call him out. And from his side of the story, nothing was off limits. It didn't take long for Max to find an ally in French Montana. Back then, French wasn't the chart-topping name he is now. He was a gritty street figure running his Cocaine City DVD series and capturing life in the Bronx and beyond. French had his own tension with Jim Jones from a shooting situation where Jim was rumored to have spread negative word about him. People were saying he was moving funny behind the scenes. So when Max and French linked up, it wasn't just a collab, it felt like a brotherhood built on shared history and mutual battle. They called their crew Coke Wave.
I banged it just enough to get my room so I could ram it up, ram it up in. Right? My window was there, he tried to grab it. So when he came in the window, I punched him in his face.
and it turned into one of the most wild, talked-about street movements in mixtape history. MaxB already knew the industry wasn't about to come rescue him. He didn't own his publishing. He didn't have real label backing. Nothing. What he did have was a voice the streets respected and a crazy talent for turning pain and swagger into songs people couldn't stop replaying. So he did what real hustlers do when they're boxed in. He went straight to the underground and made his own lane. Max started dropping music for free, letting the people hear what he felt like the industry was trying to bury. But he wasn't just putting out songs, he was throwing verbal grenades, aiming right at Jim Jones and everybody in that circle, and he did not ease up for a second. The first big shot came with a mixtape called Public Domain 3, and even the cover felt disrespectful in a calculated way. Max posed in a graveyard next to tombstones with names like Milli Vanilli, Jim Jones, and Vanilli Joel Santana carved into them, basically calling them fake like Milli Vanilli, the group known for lip syncing. In Max's eyes, Jim and Jules were riding off a wave he built, and he clowned them for it. He dropped tracks with titles like Lip Sing Rapping and rapped lines like I know them dudes need me and I was giving them the loots but them dudes done blew it. To him, they needed his sound but didn't respect his value. But Max didn't stop at the music. He went after images, reputations, and home life, swinging at the whole foundation Jim Jones was trying to build up as a brand and as a man. One of the wildest moments in the whole situation was when Max dropped the super disrespectful track She Touched It in Miami. On that record, he claimed Jim Jones's longtime girlfriend, Chrissy Lampkin, had been involved with him in very intimate ways, basically painting a picture where she crossed the line behind Jim's back. Max laughed through the verses like he was enjoying every second of the chaos, making Jones look like he was getting clowned from the inside, and the streets ran with the story and the drama. Jim Jones was caught off guard and looked shell-shocked by how hard Max came at him. He didn't see it coming. He tried to shut everything down, denying the accusations and brushing off Max's role, calling him a rapper who never got off the shelf. He even pushed the line that Max didn't write, "We Fly High," his biggest hit, but the streets weren't buying that, especially with Max's voice all over the original reference tracks. Once that talk started spreading, people began questioning what Jim's role was in Dipset's success and how much came from the people around him. Max moved like he was on battle time, and this wasn't just music talk. He claimed Jim once tried to ambush him by boxing in his car in a parking lot, hoping to catch him slipping. Max said he peeped it early, rammed Jim's Bentley out of the way, and got a few punches in before driving off. The story sounded crazy, but Max was proudly pointing at the dents in his own car like they were trophies, proof he wasn't backing down from anybody. Then November 2008 came around, and Max and French decided to press the issue in person. They rolled into Manhattan, walked into the building where Jim was recording, and made it clear the city didn't feel safe for Jones anymore. Max later claimed Jim saw how things were lining up and called the cops, and that rumor only made the tension worse for his image. Around that same time, their crews clashed at a Brooklyn club, and it turned into a brawl with chairs flying and K-9 units pulling up. It felt like a movie scene, but this was life and real animosity spilling out in public. By the time everything calmed down, MaxB hadn't just dissed Jim Jones, he turned him into a punchline in conversations. Max became a cult hero, an artist who didn't need a big label stamp to feel official. Even while he was locked into contracts that barely gave him anything back, he still found a way to move like a legend, flooding the streets with music people still play to this day. But while the beef with Jim Jones kept spreading through the hood and the mixtape circuits, MaxB was also getting ready for the biggest legal battle of his life. MaxB was gearing up to face a criminal trial that could lock his wave in place forever. On June 9th, 2009, he walked into the Bergen County Courthouse looking like a man who still believed his own story could save him. He had his people with him, cameras on him, and that same signature confidence in his walk. His legal team was talking big too, acting like they had it handled. They said they had torn apart the prosecution's main witness during cross-examination. That witness was Gina Conway, the young woman at the center of the situation, tied to the setup from the beginning. Gina had already turned herself in and agreed to testify against Max and his stepbrother Kelvin Lear Dam in exchange for a lighter sentence. Max's lawyer tried to paint her as a bitter ex, a scorned woman making up stories to protect herself. But courtrooms aren't like the streets, and you can't beat a case with charisma and attitude alone. When the jury came back with their decision, everything Max thought he understood about loyalty, rules, and second chances crashed down at once. He was found guilty on 9 out of 11 counts, including armed robbery, conspiracy, aggravated assault, and felony unaliving. the prosecution laid it out like he was the mastermind behind the robbery, even if he never stepped in the room when the shot was fired. They said he set the play up, pushed Gina and Kelvin to move on the robbery, and planned to sit back while the money came in without getting his hands dirty. The case basically sat on Gina Conway's shoulders. She cut a deal with the government, getting her original homicide charge reduced to armed robbery and manslaughter in exchange for her cooperation with a recommended 18-year sentence. The defense pushed back, saying Gina had twisted her story to shave off years and save herself.
Originally, you were sentenced to 75 years. But then last July, you said you got reduced to 20 years and then to 12 years.
The wildest part was that Gina testified that Max knew nothing of a robbery, saying she used MaxB's name to convince her boyfriend Kelvin to go through with the plan. The defense argued she only dragged Max in later out of heartbreak and self-interest, trying to turn him into the so-called puppet master so she could look more valuable to the state. But in the end, the jury wasn't buying that story, and their verdict showed who they believed. MaxB was sentenced on September 3rd, 2009 to 75 years in prison, and it hit the streets like a thunderbolt. People felt like the system had just buried one of Harlem's rawest voices alive, and fans were crushed, replaying his tracks like memorials while the news spread. Meanwhile, on the business side, it looked like Jim Jones thought he had pulled off the ultimate checkmate. Max was locked away, his voice off the streets, and Jones still held the publishing rights to Max's music. That meant every hook he ever wrote, every melody he laid down, every cent was still sliding into Jim's pocket. To make it worse, Jones took little shots whenever he could, mocking Max in public, giving him goofy nicknames, and brushing him off like he was a nobody. In interviews, Jim kept pushing the idea that Max was irrelevant, saying he was finished before he even got started, talking like Max was just old inventory sitting in the back room, something he once used but would never pull off the shelf again. But the situation wasn't as locked up as Jones probably thought, because Max's name still echoed through the streets, and his wave refused to die out. Even from behind bars, MaxB didn't fold. He adapted. The streets still had deep love for him, and his name still had weight in conversations, freestyles, and block talk. Max stayed in contact with French Montana, DJs, and independent labels, keeping his presence alive through phone calls, features, and unreleased music that slowly leaked out and fed the culture. Then in May 2010, everything shifted with one major legal move that flipped the power dynamic. A judge ruled that Jim Jones no longer had any control over MaxB's music career, breaking the hold that seemed unshakable just months before. The court found that Max had already fulfilled the terms of both contracts he'd signed with Jones back in 2005 and 2007, which meant in plain language, Max was free on the business side. He was still locked up physically, but those paper chains tying his art to another man's pockets were broken, and that alone was a huge win. With that barrier gone, Max was finally able to drop his long-awaited album Vigilante Season in 2011, and the response proved something important. The streets hadn't forgotten him at all. If anybody still doubted Max's influence, all they had to do was listen to the music around them. That wavy flow, that melodic gangster bop he'd helped shape had quietly become a cheat code for a whole wave of rappers, from the underground to the mainstream. You could turn on the radio and hear hints of Max in people's cadences, in their harmonies, and in the way they talked about waves, vibes, and feeling free, all while he was still sitting in a cell. Then came the unbelievable twist in 2016 after Max had already served 7 years. Max's new legal team came through and dropped a straight-up bomb in court. They argued that his first lawyer didn't really hold him down the way he should have, saying instead of building the strongest defense, the lawyer was more focused on chasing a payday and trying to eat off Max's rap career if he beat the case. They filed for something called post-conviction relief, and crazy enough, it actually worked. The judge vacated that original 75-year sentence, which was huge. Max later pled guilty to aggravated manslaughter as part of a deal, and that move chopped his time down heavy, first cutting 55 years off, then dropping it to 20, and eventually down to 12. Since Max had already been in for years by that point, for the first time his release didn't feel like a fantasy anymore. It felt like something you could actually circle on a calendar. By then, MaxB wasn't just a rapper. He was a legend people whispered about like a myth. You could hear his influence everywhere, from parking lot freestyles to major albums by superstars. Kanye West even tried to name his 2016 album Waves and had to publicly salute Max after the whole Wave community pressed him online. Kanye even put Max's voice on a song. while artists like Drake and Wiz Khalifa openly said they were inspired by his style. Even Jim Jones, in a rare honest moment, admitted that MaxB could have been bigger than Drake if he never went to prison, which says a lot coming from him. As 2025 pulls up, there's this strange question floating over everything. Are Max and Jim still enemies, or is that chapter finally closing for good? Max, speaking from prison, sounded like his whole mindset had shifted. He said he was a new man now, a husband, a father of 4, with his focus on family and growth instead of revenge. That old rage that once fueled the beef seemed faded, replaced by reflection and maturity, and he even hinted that he might be open to burying the hatchet one day. Jim Jones, though, wasn't really matching that same energy. He and French Montana managed to fix their issues and even dropped music together in 2023, which showed some bridges can be rebuilt. But when it came to Max, Jim made it clear that was a different type of situation. He said he didn't wish Max any harm, but he also wasn't trying to get friendly or act like everything was cool again. So now the story sits in this weird place. One man in a cell talking peace, another man outside keeping his distance, and the streets still debating who was right, who was wrong, and what would really happen if they ever ended up in the same room again. Let me know what you think in the comments. Should Max and Jim ever fully squash it, or is it better left alone? Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video with someone who remembers the wave era, and I'll see you in the next one.